The dust kicked up from the convoy of Humvees as they rolled through the gates of Forward Operating Base Sentinel in eastern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stepped out of the lead vehicle, her boots hitting the hard-packed earth with quiet confidence. She adjusted the strap of her rifle case and surveyed the sprawling military compound that would be her home for the next 8 months. The base buzzed with activity. Soldiers moved with purpose between the tan-colored buildings and fortified positions. The sound of helicopters echoed overhead, while the distant rumble of generators provided a constant background hum. Maya had seen dozens of bases like this during her 7 years in the Army, but each deployment brought new challenges and new people to win over. "Sergeant Chen?" A young private approached her, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the early morning hour. "Colonel Morrison wants to see you in the command center immediately." Maya nodded and shouldered her gear. She had expected this summons. New arrivals, especially specialists like herself, always got called in for briefings. What she hadn't expected was the reception waiting for her inside the air-conditioned command center. Colonel James Morrison looked up from a tactical map spread across a large table. He was a tall man with graying temples and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in combat zones. His eyes narrowed as Maya entered and snapped to attention. "At ease," Morrison said, but his tone carried no warmth. "So you're the sniper they sent us?" "Yes, sir. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen reporting for duty." Morrison walked around the table, studying her with obvious skepticism. Maya stood perfectly still, used to such scrutiny. At 5 feet 6 inches with a compact build, she didn't look like what most people expected from an elite marksman. Her Asian features and quiet demeanor often led others to underestimate her capabilities. "I requested a sniper team," Morrison continued, his voice growing more irritated. "Command sends me 1 soldier, a female soldier at that." He shook his head. "No offense, Sergeant, but this isn't some training exercise back in the States. We're dealing with Taliban fighters who know these mountains better than we know our own backyards. I need someone who can handle the pressure and make the hard shots when it counts." Maya remained silent, her expression neutral. She had heard variations of this speech many times before. Early in her career, it had stung. Now it simply meant she would have another opportunity to prove herself through actions rather than words. "Sir, with respect," Maya finally spoke, her voice steady and calm. "I've completed 3 combat deployments and have extensive experience in mountain warfare. I'm confident I can meet whatever challenges this assignment presents." Morrison scoffed. "Mountain warfare? Have you ever spent weeks at a time in these particular mountains, Sergeant? Have you tracked enemy fighters across terrain where one wrong step means a 1,000-foot drop? Have you taken a kill shot at over a mile in conditions where the wind can change direction 3 times in a single minute?" "No, sir, not in these specific mountains. But I have—" "That's what I thought." Morrison cut her off. He turned to Major David Santos, his operations officer, who had been quietly observing the exchange. "David, I want you to take Sergeant Chen to the range tomorrow morning. Let's see what we're working with before we decide how to use her." Major Santos nodded. He was younger than Morrison, probably in his early 30s, with intelligent dark eyes and a more measured demeanor than his commanding officer. "Yes, sir. I'll arrange for a comprehensive evaluation." "Good. Sergeant Chen, you'll be bunking in Building C with the other female personnel. Get settled in tonight. Tomorrow morning at 0700, you'll report to the range for evaluation. Depending on how that goes, we'll determine your assignment." Morrison's dismissive tone made it clear he had already made up his mind about her capabilities. "Understood, sir." Maya saluted and turned to leave, but Morrison's voice stopped her at the door. "Oh, and Sergeant, this isn't some gender equality publicity stunt. Out here, people's lives depend on their teammates being the best at what they do. I won't risk my soldiers' safety to make political points." Maya turned back to face him, her jaw tightening slightly. "Sir, I've never asked for special treatment, and I don't expect any. I've earned my position through performance, not politics." After she left, Major Santos remained in the command center with Morrison. The two men had served together for 3 years and had developed a strong working relationship built on mutual respect and shared combat experience. "Jim, maybe we should give her a fair chance," Santos said quietly. "Her file shows some impressive qualifications." Morrison waved his hand dismissively. "David, I've been doing this for 22 years. I've seen plenty of soldiers who look good on paper but can't perform when it matters, and I've never seen a female sniper who could handle the physical and mental demands of what we do out here. Times are changing. Maybe nothing." Morrison's voice hardened. "Look, I'm not saying women can't serve effectively in the military, but sniping in these conditions requires specific physical capabilities and mental toughness that very few people possess. The enemy doesn't care about our progressive policies. They'll put a bullet through anyone who can't do the job." Santos decided not to push further. He understood Morrison's concerns, even if he didn't entirely agree with them. The colonel had seen too many good soldiers die because of poor decisions or inadequate preparation. His caution, while sometimes excessive, came from a genuine desire to protect his people. Maya found Building C without difficulty. It was a long, low structure with individual rooms for the female personnel stationed at the base. She was pleased to discover she would have a private room, a luxury not always available at forward operating bases. As she unpacked her gear, Maya reflected on the colonel's reception. She had faced similar skepticism throughout her military career, but it still frustrated her. She understood that some of the doubt came from legitimate concerns about unit cohesion and combat effectiveness. However, she suspected much of it stemmed from simple prejudice and outdated assumptions about women in combat roles. Maya had grown up in a military family. Her father had served as an infantry officer in the Marines, and her older brother was currently a Navy pilot. The military lifestyle was all she had ever known, and she had never questioned her desire to serve her country. When she enlisted at 18, she had initially planned to work in intelligence or communications. The sniper program had found her rather than the other way around. During basic training, Maya had consistently scored at the top of her class in marksmanship. Her natural stability, exceptional eyesight, and ability to remain calm under pressure had caught the attention of her instructors. When the opportunity arose to try out for sniper school, her drill sergeant had practically forced her to apply. Sniper training had been the most challenging experience of her life. The physical demands were brutal, but the mental aspects were even harder. Hours of motionless observation, complex ballistic calculations, and the psychological preparation for taking human life required a level of discipline and focus that pushed most candidates beyond their breaking point. Of the 32 soldiers who began Maya's class, only 8 graduated. She finished third in the final rankings. Her first deployment to Iraq had been a proving ground in more ways than one. Maya had been assigned to an infantry battalion where she worked primarily in an overwatch role, providing security for patrols and convoys from concealed positions. The soldiers had been skeptical at first, but her performance quickly earned their respect. Over the course of that deployment, she had confirmed 17 enemy kills and prevented numerous attacks on coalition forces. Her second deployment, also to Iraq, had been more complex. Maya had worked with special operations teams conducting targeted raids against high-value targets. The missions required extreme precision and the ability to operate independently for extended periods. She had excelled in this role, developing a reputation for reliability and coolness under pressure that followed her throughout the special operations community. Her third deployment, to Syria, had been her most challenging yet. Working with a joint task force, Maya had operated in an advisory role, training local forces while conducting counter-terrorism operations against ISIS fighters. The environment had been politically complex and tactically demanding, requiring not just marksmanship skills, but cultural sensitivity and tactical adaptability. Now, facing her fourth combat deployment, Maya felt as prepared as anyone could be for the challenges ahead. Afghanistan presented unique difficulties with its high altitude, extreme weather, and complex tribal dynamics. However, she was confident in her abilities and determined to prove herself once again to skeptical commanders and soldiers. The next morning arrived with the harsh clarity of high-altitude sunlight. Maya was up before dawn, conducting her usual routine of physical training and equipment maintenance. She cleaned and inspected her rifle, a custom-built precision instrument that had been her constant companion for 3 years. The weapon was perfectly zeroed and had never failed her when it mattered most. At exactly 0700, Maya reported to the firing range located on the northern edge of the base. Major Santos was waiting for her, along with Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the base's senior marksmanship instructor. The range consisted of multiple firing positions at various distances, extending out to nearly 1,200 meters in the clear mountain air. "Good morning, Sergeant Chen," Major Santos greeted her professionally. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez will be conducting your evaluation today. He's worked with every sniper who's rotated through this base in the past 2 years. Rodriguez was a compact man in his early 40s with the weathered hands and squinting eyes of someone who had spent years behind a rifle scope. He studied Maya's weapon with obvious expertise as she laid it out on the shooting table. "Nice setup," he admitted grudgingly. "Custom barrel, match-grade trigger, quality optics. What's your preferred zero distance?" 200 meters for the base zero, sir. I have drop compensations calculated and verified out to 2,500 meters. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "We'll start at 300 meters with standard targets, then work our way out. I want to see groups, not just hits. Can you shoot precision or just minute of man?" Maya smiled slightly. "I can shoot precision, Master Sergeant." They began with stationary targets at moderate ranges. Maya's performance was flawless. Her groups were consistently under 1 minute of angle, meaning her shots at 300 meters landed within a 3-inch circle. At 500 meters, she maintained similar precision, despite the increased difficulty of reading wind conditions and managing bullet drop. As they moved to longer ranges, a small crowd of soldiers began to gather to watch. Word had spread quickly that the new female sniper was being evaluated, and curiosity had gotten the better of several off-duty personnel. Maya tried to ignore the spectators and focus on her shooting, but she could feel their skeptical stares. At 800 meters, the targets became significantly more challenging. The wind was picking up as the morning progressed, creating complex air currents that could push bullets several feet off target if not properly compensated. Maya studied the terrain through her scope, noting the way grass and dust moved at different distances. She made careful adjustments to her scope's windage settings before settling into her shooting position. The first shot was a direct hit in the center of the target. The second and third shots landed within inches of the first, creating a tight group that would have been impressive at half the distance. The watching soldiers began to murmur among themselves with grudging respect. "Not bad," Rodriguez admitted as they walked out to check the targets. "Let's see how you do at 1,000. The 1,000-meter targets pushed Maya's skills to their limits. At this distance, even small errors in technique or judgment became magnified dramatically. The slightest miscalculation of wind speed or bullet drop could result in a complete miss. Maya took her time, studying conditions and calculating her holds carefully before each shot. Her first shot at 1,000 meters was slightly low and left of center, missing the bullseye by about 6 inches. She made quick adjustments and sent her second round, which struck dead center. The third shot landed right beside the second, confirming her corrections were accurate. By this time, Colonel Morrison had arrived at the range to observe. He stood behind the shooting line with his arms crossed, watching with obvious skepticism as Maya prepared for the final phase of her evaluation. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez," Morrison called out, "let's make this interesting. Set up a moving target scenario." Rodriguez looked surprised. Moving targets were typically reserved for advanced evaluations, not basic qualifications. "Sir, we haven't run moving target scenarios with the other snipers who've rotated through." "This isn't other snipers," Morrison replied. "If Sergeant Chen wants to convince me she belongs here, she needs to show me she can handle anything we might encounter in combat." Maya overheard the exchange, but remained focused on her equipment. She understood what Morrison was doing. He was trying to set her up to fail, giving her a test that was more difficult than standard protocols required. Rather than feeling intimidated, she felt a familiar sense of calm determination settle over her. The moving target system consisted of a man-sized silhouette that traveled along a cable system at varying speeds and distances. The target could be programmed to move at different angles and speeds, simulating the movement patterns of enemy fighters trying to avoid detection or escape from sniper fire. "We'll start simple," Rodriguez announced as he programmed the target system. "Target will move at walking speed across a 100-meter front at 600 meters distance. Left to right, constant speed. You'll have 3 shots." Maya settled into her shooting position and studied the target through her scope as it began its movement. Shooting moving targets required leading the target by precisely the right amount, accounting for the time it would take the bullet to travel to the target location. Too much lead and the shot would pass in front of the target. Too little lead and the bullet would trail behind. She tracked the target's movement, calculating its speed and the trajectory her bullet would need to follow. When she felt confident in her lead calculation, Maya squeezed the trigger with smooth, steady pressure. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and through her scope she watched the target jerk and stop as her bullet found its mark. "Hit! Center mass!" Rodriguez called out, his voice showing the first hint of genuine surprise. The second target moved faster and changed direction once during its transit across the range. This required Maya to recalculate her lead in real time as the target's speed and angle changed. She tracked it patiently, waiting for the right moment to take her shot. When she fired, the target jerked to a stop just as the first one had. "Hit center mass," Rodriguez repeated, this time with unmistakable admiration in his voice. Colonel Morrison stepped closer to the firing line, his skeptical expression beginning to show cracks of uncertainty. The gathered soldiers had grown quiet, recognizing they were witnessing something exceptional. For the third target, Rodriguez programmed the most difficult scenario available. The target would move at running speed, change direction twice, and vary its speed throughout the engagement. It was the kind of shot that even experienced snipers missed more often than they hit. Maya watched the target begin its complex dance across the range. She tracked its movement carefully, noting the timing of its direction changes and speed variations. This wasn't just a test of marksmanship. It required pattern recognition, timing, and the confidence to take an extremely difficult shot under pressure. The target completed its first direction change and began accelerating. Maya adjusted her lead and prepared to fire. Just as she began applying pressure to the trigger, the target changed direction again, requiring her to quickly recalculate and adjust her aim. Without hesitation, she made the correction and fired. The target jerked to a halt, struck dead center. The range fell completely silent for several seconds. Then Master Sergeant Rodriguez began to clap, followed quickly by several of the watching soldiers. Even some of the more skeptical observers couldn't help but show their appreciation for the exceptional display of marksmanship they had just witnessed. Colonel Morrison, however, remained unimpressed. He walked over to Maya as she secured her rifle and prepared to leave the firing line. "Nice shooting, Sergeant," he said, though his tone suggested the compliment was grudging at best. "But target shooting and combat are 2 different things. Any soldier can look good when they're lying comfortable on a range with perfect conditions and no one shooting back." Maya met his gaze steadily. Yes, sir. I understand the difference. Do you? Because from what I've seen, you haven't been tested under real combat conditions yet. Not the kind we face out here. Morrison gestured toward the mountains visible in the distance. Those peaks are where the real test happens, Sergeant. When you're cold, tired, and scared, lying in a hide position for days at a time, waiting for a target that might never appear. When the enemy is actively hunting for you and one mistake means you don't come home. Sir, with respect, I have combat experience. Morrison held up his hand to cut her off. Urban combat in Iraq and Syria, according to your file. Desert fighting with good supply lines and air support always available. This is different, Sergeant Chen. This is mountain warfare at its most primitive and unforgiving. Maya felt her frustration building, but kept her expression neutral. She had proven herself repeatedly throughout her career, but it seemed like Colonel Morrison was determined to find reasons to doubt her capabilities, regardless of what she demonstrated. What would you like me to do to prove I'm ready, sir? Morrison studied her for a long moment, then turned to Major Santos. David, we have that reconnaissance mission scheduled for next week, the one to establish overwatch positions in the Korangal Valley. Santos looked uncomfortable. Yes, sir, but that's a particularly dangerous area. We've lost 2 teams to ambushes in that sector in the past month. Exactly. If Sergeant Chen wants to prove she belongs here, she can earn her place on that mission. Morrison turned back to Maya. You'll partner with one of our experienced mountain fighters. If you can complete that mission successfully, I'll consider using you for regular operations. Maya recognized this for what it was, another attempt to set her up for failure by giving her the most dangerous assignment available. However, she also saw it as an opportunity to finally put the doubts to rest. I accept, sir. Good. Report to Major Santos tomorrow morning for briefing and preparation. Your partner will be Sergeant First Class Jake Williams, one of our most experienced mountain specialists. Morrison's smile was cold. He's survived 15 missions in the high country. Let's see if you can match his record. The briefing room was thick with tension as Maya entered at Uros 600 the next morning. Major Santos stood at the front beside a large topographical map of the Korangal Valley, while several other soldiers sat around the table studying intelligence reports and satellite photographs. The room fell quiet as Maya took her seat. Gentlemen, this is Staff Sergeant Chen, who will be joining the mission, Santos announced. A few soldiers nodded politely. But Maya could sense the underlying skepticism. These were hardened mountain fighters who had seen too many good soldiers die in the unforgiving terrain they would be entering. Sergeant First Class Williams, you'll be partnering with Sergeant Chen for the Overwatch portion of this mission. Santos gestured toward a man sitting near the back of the room. Jake Williams was exactly what Maya had expected from Colonel Morrison's description. He was tall and lean, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of high-altitude operations. His movements were economical and precise, and his pale blue eyes held the steady gaze of someone completely comfortable with violence. When he stood to shake her hand, Maya noticed the slight limp that suggested old injuries. Ma'am, Williams said simply, his handshake firm but brief. His tone was neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. Sergeant Williams, Maya replied. She had worked with enough special operations personnel to recognize his type. He would judge her based entirely on performance, not personality or politics. That was exactly what she preferred. Major Santos began the detailed briefing. The mission was complex and dangerous. Intelligence had identified a major Taliban supply route through the Korangal Valley, where weapons and fighters were being moved to support operations against coalition forces. The terrain was some of the most difficult in Afghanistan, with steep rocky slopes, limited visibility, and weather that could change from clear to deadly in a matter of hours. The primary objective is to establish observation posts at 3 key locations along the supply route, Santos explained, pointing to positions marked on the map. Teams Alpha and Bravo will set up electronic surveillance equipment at the lower elevations. Team Charlie, that's Williams and Chen, will establish the high overwatch position here. He indicated a point on a ridge nearly 8,000 feet above sea level. Maya studied the topographical lines around their assigned position. The approach would require a 2-day climb through terrain that offered little cover and multiple opportunities for ambush. Once in position, they would be isolated and completely dependent on their own resources for up to a week. "What's the threat assessment for the overwatch position?" Williams asked, speaking for the first time since the briefing began. "High," Santos replied bluntly. "Local Taliban forces know the value of that ridge and have contested previous attempts to establish observation posts there. We lost contact with a 2-man team in that area 3 weeks ago. Their bodies were recovered 4 days later." The room grew even quieter. Everyone understood the implications. This wasn't a routine mission. It was a high-risk operation where survival would depend on exceptional skill and considerable luck. "What kind of support will we have?" Maya asked. "Limited. The terrain prevents vehicle access and weather conditions make helicopter support unreliable. Once you're in position, you'll be on your own until the mission is complete or emergency extraction becomes necessary." Santos continued the briefing with details about communication procedures, extraction plans, and contingency operations. Maya took careful notes, but her mind was already working through the tactical challenges they would face. The mission would require not just marksmanship skills, but mountain climbing ability, survival expertise, and the mental toughness to operate under extreme stress for extended periods. After the briefing ended, Williams approached Maya as the other soldiers filed out of the room. "We need to talk," he said quietly, privately. They walked to a quiet corner of the base where shipping containers had been arranged to create a semi-private area. Williams sat on a wooden crate and gestured for Maya to take a seat across from him. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you," Williams began. "I don't care that you're a woman. I don't care about politics or policy. What I care about is coming back alive from this mission, and that means I need to know exactly what I'm working with." Maya appreciated his directness. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Your real combat experience, not what's in your official file. How many people you've killed, how you handle pressure, whether you can climb at altitude for 2 days straight carrying 60 pounds of gear. I need to know if you're going to be an asset or a liability." For the next hour, Maya provided Williams with a detailed account of her combat experience. She described her urban operations in Iraq, the complexities of working with Syrian forces, and the challenges of operating in politically sensitive environments. She was honest about her strengths and limitations, knowing that any deception could prove fatal once they were isolated in the mountains. Williams listened without interruption, occasionally asking pointed questions that demonstrated his own extensive experience. When Maya finished, he was quiet for several minutes, apparently weighing what he had heard. "Okay," he said finally. "You've got good experience, but not in terrain like this. Mountain warfare is different from anything you've done before. The altitude alone will affect your thinking and reaction time. The cold can kill you faster than enemy fire, and if you get injured, there's no medevac helicopter coming to save you." "I understand the risks," Maya replied. "Do you? Because there's understanding risks intellectually, and then there's understanding them in your gut. When you're lying in a hide position at 8,000 feet with frozen water bottles and enemy fighters trying to triangulate your position based on muzzle flash, intellectual understanding doesn't mean much." Williams stood up and looked toward the mountains visible in the distance. "We leave tomorrow at 0400. Between now and then, we need to go over equipment, routes, communication procedures, and contingency plans. If we do this right, we might both come back alive." The remainder of the day was spent in intensive preparation. Williams proved to be a meticulous planner who considered every possible scenario and contingency. He questioned Maya's equipment choices, tested her knowledge of mountain survival techniques, and pushed her to think through the tactical challenges they would face. Maya's respect for Williams grew throughout the day. Despite his initial skepticism, he approached their partnership professionally and thoroughly. He shared information freely, offered suggestions for improving her gear configuration, and provided insights gained from years of high-altitude operations. "Your rifle setup is good," Williams observed, as Maya cleaned and inspected her weapon for the third time that day. "But you need to think about how altitude will affect your ballistics. Air density at 8,000 feet is significantly different from sea level. Your bullets will fly flatter and faster, which changes your drop compensations." Maya nodded, making notes in her shooting data book. She had operated at altitude before, but never at the extreme elevations they would encounter in the Hindu Kush Mountains. "There's something else," Williams continued. "Above 7,000 feet, your body starts working differently. Less oxygen means slower thinking, reduced fine motor skills, and delayed reactions. It affects different people in different ways, but it affects everyone. How do you compensate for it? Experience mostly. You learn to recognize the symptoms and adjust accordingly. But the first time at extreme altitude, everyone struggles. The question is whether you can perform your job while struggling." That evening, Maya lay in her bunk reviewing maps and meteorological data. The weather forecast showed a potential storm system moving through the area in 4 days, which would complicate their extraction if the mission ran long. She made mental notes of alternative routes and backup plans, knowing that flexibility would be essential to their survival. At 0400 the next morning, Maya met Williams at the equipment staging area. Both soldiers wore full mountain warfare gear, including insulated clothing layers, climbing equipment, and enough food and water for 5 days. Their weapons and optics were secured in protective cases designed to withstand extreme conditions. The insertion helicopter was a special operations variant designed for high-altitude operations. The pilot, a chief warrant officer with evident mountain flying experience, briefed them on the flight plan and extraction procedures. "Weather window looks good for the next 12 hours, the pilot explained. "After that, we've got a storm system moving in that might complicate extraction. If you need emergency pickup, call early rather than late." The flight to their insertion point took 40 minutes following a low-level route designed to avoid detection by enemy observers. Maya watched the terrain pass beneath them, noting the steep valleys, rocky outcroppings, and limited vegetation that characterized the high country. It was beautiful and hostile in equal measure. 2 minutes out," the pilot announced through their headsets. The helicopter flared and touched down on a small clearing barely large enough for the aircraft. Maya and Williams quickly unloaded their gear and moved away from the landing zone as the helicopter departed, leaving them alone in the vast mountain wilderness. The silence was profound after the helicopter's departure. Maya could hear her own breathing and the subtle sounds of wind moving through the rocks above them. The air was thin and cold despite the early morning sunlight. "Welcome to the high country," Williams said quietly, shouldering his pack. "From here on out, noise discipline is critical. Sound travels far in these mountains, and the enemy knows how to use that against us." They began their climb immediately, following a route Williams had memorized from aerial photographs and previous reconnaissance missions. The terrain was challenging even at the lower elevations, requiring careful attention to footing and route selection. Maya quickly discovered that mountain climbing with full combat gear was significantly more demanding than anything she had experienced during training. After 2 hours of steady climbing, they reached their first rest point. Maya was breathing heavily and could feel the effects of the altitude. Williams showed no signs of exertion, confirming his reputation as an experienced mountain fighter. "How are you feeling?" Williams asked as they shared water and energy bars. Good, Maya replied, though she was working harder than she wanted to admit. Williams studied her carefully. Don't lie to me. If you're having problems, I need to know now while we still have options. Maya considered his words, then decided on honesty. The altitude is affecting me more than I expected. I'm not in distress, but I'm working harder than normal. That's normal for first-timers at this elevation. Your body will adapt over the next day or two, but until then, you need to pace yourself and drink more water than you think you need. Williams handed her an additional water bottle. Dehydration at altitude can kill you as surely as a bullet. They resumed climbing, with Williams setting a more conservative pace that allowed Maya to maintain her strength while adapting to the thin air. By late afternoon, they had reached 7,000 feet and were approaching the most dangerous part of their route. From here to our final position, we're exposed to observation from multiple directions, Williams explained as they studied the terrain ahead. We'll move during limited visibility periods only, dawn, dusk, and overcast conditions. They established a temporary hide position in a cluster of large rocks and waited for the sun to set. Maya used the time to study their objective through binoculars, noting potential shooting positions and fields of fire from their planned overwatch location. See that saddle between the two peaks? Williams pointed to a feature about 800 meters ahead of them. That's where we'll set up our primary position. Good visibility down the valley, multiple escape routes, and natural protection from weather. As darkness fell, they began the final approach to their objective. Movement was slow and deliberate, with frequent pauses to listen for sounds that might indicate enemy activity. Maya's night vision equipment revealed a landscape of shadows and uncertain shapes that could conceal threats or simply be tricks of the failing light. 2 hours after sunset, they reached their destination. The overwatch position was a natural rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility down the valley while offering protection from observation and direct fire. Williams had clearly chosen the location based on extensive experience and tactical knowledge. "This is home for the next few days," Williams whispered as they began establishing their position. "We'll work in shifts, with one person always on watch while the other rests or handles equipment maintenance." They spent the remainder of the night setting up their hide position, arranging camouflage, and preparing their observation and communication equipment. Maya was impressed by Williams's attention to detail and the thoroughness of his preparations. As dawn approached, Maya settled behind her rifle to begin the first observation shift. Through her scope, she could see the valley floor nearly 2,000 feet below them, where intelligence suggested enemy supply convoys would travel. The view was spectacular and intimidating, emphasizing their isolation and vulnerability. "Contact," Williams whispered from his position beside her. Maya followed his pointing finger to see movement on a trail approximately 100-200 meters below them. Through her scope, she could identify 4 individuals carrying what appeared to be weapons and equipment. They moved with the careful awareness of people who knew they were in dangerous territory. "Possible enemy patrol," Maya observed quietly. "Confirmed enemy," Williams replied. "I recognize that equipment configuration. They're Taliban fighters, probably conducting reconnaissance of their own." Maya tracked the patrol through her scope as they moved along the valley floor. The distance was well within her effective range, but their orders were to observe and report, not to engage unless directly threatened. "They're moving toward the position where Team Alpha should be setting up their surveillance equipment," Williams noted, consulting his map. Maya continued tracking the patrol, noting their route and probable destination. If they maintained their current direction, they would almost certainly discover the electronic surveillance team within the next few hours. "Should we warn Alpha Team?" Maya asked. Williams was already reaching for his radio. The patrol's discovery of Team Alpha could compromise the entire mission and put all 3 teams at risk. However, radio communication from their position risked revealing their location to enemy direction-finding equipment. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch," Williams transmitted in a barely audible whisper. "Four-person patrol approaching your area from the northeast. Estimate 15 minutes to your position." The response was immediate, but tense. "Overwatch, this is Alpha. We copy. Moving to alternate position now." Through her scope, Maya watched the enemy patrol continue down the valley. Unaware of the team they had nearly discovered, the near miss emphasized the extreme danger of their situation and the constant vigilance required for survival in the mountain environment. "Welcome to the Korengal Valley," Williams said quietly. "This is going to be a long week." Over the next 3 days, Maya and Williams maintained their overwatch position while monitoring enemy activity in the valley below. They observed numerous patrols, supply movements, and what appeared to be preparations for a major operation against coalition forces. The intelligence they gathered was valuable, but obtaining it required them to remain motionless for hours at a time in increasingly harsh conditions. The weather had deteriorated as predicted, with freezing temperatures, high winds, and intermittent snow that made observation difficult and movement treacherous. Maya discovered that mountain warfare truly was different from anything she had experienced before. The cold was more penetrating, the altitude more debilitating, and the psychological stress of isolation more intense than she had anticipated. Williams proved to be an exceptional partner. His experience and knowledge kept them alive and effective under conditions that would have defeated less capable teams. He shared his expertise freely, helping Maya adapt to the unique challenges of high-altitude operations while maintaining the professional standards required for mission success. On their 4th day in position, the situation changed dramatically. "Multiple contacts," Williams whispered urgently, studying the valley through his binoculars. "Large group moving up the main trail, at least 20 individuals, heavily armed." Maya shifted her rifle to cover the approaching group. Through her scope, she could see that this was no ordinary patrol. The fighters were well-equipped and moving with the discipline of experienced combatants. More concerning, they appeared to be heading directly toward the team's positions. "This looks like a coordinated sweep operation," Williams observed. "They know we're here." As Maya watched the enemy force through her scope, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Several of the fighters were carrying what appeared to be direction-finding equipment, the kind used to locate radio transmissions and electronic surveillance devices. "They're hunting all 3 teams," Maya realized. "This isn't a coincidence." Williams reached for his radio to warn the other teams, but before he could transmit, the sound of automatic weapons fire echoed up from the valley below. Team Alpha was under attack. The mission had just become a fight for survival, and Maya was about to discover whether her years of training and experience had prepared her for the ultimate test of a sniper's skill and courage. The sound of gunfire from Team Alpha's position echoed through the mountains like thunder. Maya could see muzzle flashes in the valley below as the surveillance team fought desperately against superior numbers. Through her scope, she counted at least 15 enemy fighters converging on Alpha's position from multiple directions. "Alpha Team, report status," Williams whispered urgently into his radio. The response came between bursts of automatic weapons fire. "Overwatch, we're pinned down. Multiple casualties. Need immediate support." Williams looked at Maya, his expression grim. "The rules just changed. Our observation mission is now a combat operation." He paused, studying the tactical situation through his binoculars. "Can you provide effective fire at these ranges?" Maya was already calculating distances and wind conditions. The enemy fighters attacking Team Alpha were approximately 1,400 meters below them, operating at the extreme edge of her rifle's effective range under ideal conditions. The current weather, with gusting winds and intermittent snow, made precision shooting extremely challenging. "I can engage them," Maya replied, settling behind her rifle. But at this distance, in these conditions, I'll need multiple shots to achieve decisive effects. Do it. I'll coordinate with Alpha Team and call for extraction. Maya pressed her eye to her rifle scope and began studying the tactical situation below. The enemy fighters had Team Alpha surrounded in a rocky depression with limited cover. The surveillance team was fighting bravely, but was clearly outnumbered and outgunned. Without immediate intervention, they would be overrun within minutes. She identified the most critical targets first. 2 enemy fighters with machine guns were providing suppressive fire that kept Alpha Team pinned down, while others maneuvered for flanking positions. Maya adjusted her scope settings for the extreme range and began calculating her shooting solutions. The wind was gusting between 8 and 12 miles per hour from her left, requiring significant windage corrections. The angle of her shot, firing downhill at such a steep angle, would affect her bullet's trajectory in ways that required complex mental calculations. Most challenging of all, her targets were moving unpredictably as they advanced on Alpha Team's position. Maya forced herself to breathe slowly and evenly, fighting the adrenaline that threatened to affect her fine motor control. She had trained for situations like this, but training could never fully replicate the stress of knowing that people's lives depended on her marksmanship ability. She settled her crosshairs on the first machine gunner, leading him slightly to account for his movement while compensating for wind and distance. When she felt confident in her shot placement, Maya squeezed the trigger with steady pressure. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and through her scope, she watched the machine gunner drop immediately. Her bullet had struck him center mass, eliminating the threat he posed to the pinned surveillance team. "Good hit," Williams observed, watching through his binoculars. "The machine gun fire has stopped." Maya was already transitioning to her next target, the second machine gunner, who was positioned about 50 meters from the first. This fighter had noticed his partner's death and was trying to relocate to a more protected position, making him a more difficult target. She tracked his movement through her scope, waiting for him to pause long enough for an accurate shot. When he stopped behind a large rock to assess the situation, Maya had her opportunity. Her second shot struck him in the upper chest, spinning him around before he collapsed behind his cover. The effect on the battle below was immediate. With both machine guns eliminated, Team Alpha was able to return more effective fire and begin maneuvering to better positions. However, the remaining enemy fighters were adapting quickly to the threat from above. "They're trying to locate our position," Williams warned. "I can see fighters moving up the slope toward us." Maya continued engaging targets in the valley while Williams monitored the approaches to their position. Her third shot eliminated an enemy fighter who was attempting to coordinate the assault on Alpha Team. Her fourth shot wounded another fighter who was moving toward Alpha's flank. With each shot, Maya felt herself settling deeper into the focused state that all snipers train to achieve. The cold, wind, and altitude seemed to fade into the background as she concentrated entirely on her rifle scope and the tactical situation below. Her breathing became automatic, her movements economical and precise. "Contact rear," Williams announced suddenly. "3 fighters approaching our position from the northwest. Range 400 meters. Maya glanced away from her scope to see Williams engaging the new threat with his rifle. The tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex, with enemy forces now attacking from multiple directions. They were in danger of being surrounded and overrun. "Alpha Team, what's your status?" Williams called into his radio while firing controlled bursts at the approaching fighters. "Overwatch. We're mobile, but still under heavy contact." "Can you continue providing sniper support?" Maya was already back behind her rifle, searching for targets in the valley below. The remaining enemy fighters had taken better cover positions, making them more difficult to engage. However, she could see that Alpha Team was beginning to withdraw toward a more defensible position, buying precious time for extraction. Her fifth shot of the engagement struck an enemy fighter who was attempting to flank Alpha Team's new position. Her sixth shot forced another fighter to abandon his advance and seek better cover. She was methodically reducing the enemy's ability to maintain their assault while providing Alpha Team with the opportunity to escape. "Williams, we need to start thinking about our own extraction," Maya said between shots. "Those fighters you engaged are still approaching, and there might be more behind them." "Agreed. But we can't abandon Alpha Team while they're still in contact." Maya's seventh shot eliminated another enemy fighter, and she was pleased to see that Alpha Team had successfully reached a position where they could provide mutual support while continuing their withdrawal. The immediate crisis was passing, but their own situation was becoming more dangerous. Through her scope, Maya noticed movement that made her heart skip. A group of enemy fighters was setting up what appeared to be a mortar position in a clearing about 1,600 meters away. If they successfully established the weapon, they could rain indirect fire on both Alpha Team and the Overwatch position. "I've got enemy fighters setting up a mortar," Maya reported. "Range 1,600 meters. This is at the absolute limit of my effective range in these conditions." Williams looked through his binoculars in the direction Maya indicated. "I see them. That mortar will be a game changer if they get it operational. Can you take the shot?" Maya studied the target through her scope. At 1,600 meters, in gusting wind and thin air, with a target that was partially concealed and moving intermittently, this would be one of the most challenging shots of her career. The mathematics of the shot required her to account for numerous variables, many of which could only be estimated rather than precisely calculated. She made careful adjustments to her scope settings, calculating bullet drop, wind drift, and the effects of the extreme range and altitude. The mortar crew was working quickly, apparently aware that they were exposed to observation and potential sniper fire from the ridgelines above. Maya settled into her shooting position and began her breathing cycle. This shot would require perfect technique and considerable luck. She tracked the movement of the mortar crew through her scope, waiting for the optimal moment when wind conditions and target exposure would give her the best chance of success. The crew chief, identifiable by his position and the way others deferred to him, paused near the mortar tube to direct its positioning. Maya adjusted her aim point, leading the target slightly and compensating for the extreme range and wind conditions. When she felt confident in her shot placement, Maya squeezed the trigger. The bullet's flight time at this range was nearly 2 seconds, an eternity in combat where targets could move unpredictably. She watched through her scope as her bullet arced across the valley, fighting wind and gravity on its long journey to the target. The crew chief dropped immediately, struck in the center of mass by her bullet. The rest of the mortar crew scattered, abandoning their weapon and seeking cover in the surrounding rocks. The threat of indirect fire had been eliminated. "Outstanding shot," Williams said with genuine admiration. "I've never seen anyone make a shot like that under these conditions." Maya was already searching for new targets, but the enemy forces in the valley were withdrawing. Her precision fire had broken their coordinated assault and forced them to abandon their attack on Alpha Team. The surveillance team was now able to withdraw to their extraction point relatively unmolested. "Overwatch, this is Alpha," came the radio call. "We're approaching the extraction point. The sniper support was incredible. Who's your shooter?" Williams glanced at Maya before responding. "Alpha, that's classified. But whoever it is knows their business." The sound of approaching helicopters echoed through the mountains as extraction aircraft moved toward the designated pickup zones. Maya and Williams began preparing to abandon their position and move to their own extraction point, a treacherous climb down the opposite side of the ridge. "Before we move," Williams said quietly, "I need to ask you something. How many confirmed kills do you have?" Maya looked at him curiously. "Why do you ask?" "Because what I just witnessed doesn't match what I expected from your experience level. That last shot, I've worked with some of the best snipers in the military, and I've never seen shooting like that under combat conditions." Maya was quiet for a moment, then reached into her pack and withdrew a small notebook. She opened it to a page covered with neat handwriting and careful notations. "This is my shooting log," she explained. "Every shot I've taken in combat, with date, location, range, and conditions." She handed the notebook to Williams. "The official records don't always tell the complete story." Williams studied the notebook with growing amazement. Page after page contained detailed records of combat engagements, each entry meticulously documented with professional precision. The ranges and conditions described went far beyond what was typically reported in after-action reports. "This says you have 127 confirmed kills," Williams said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's correct. But your official file..." Official files reflect what gets reported through proper channels. Sometimes operational security requirements or classification levels prevent certain information from appearing in personnel records. Maya retrieved her notebook and returned it to her pack. "My previous assignments involved situations where detailed reporting wasn't always possible or advisable." Williams stared at her with new understanding. "You weren't just a regular Army sniper, were you? You were working with special operations units on classified missions." Maya didn't respond directly, but her silence was answer enough. Williams had worked with enough special operations personnel to recognize the signs. The advanced equipment, specialized training, and exceptional capabilities all made sense in that context. "That explains a lot," Williams said, "including why Colonel Morrison is being so careful about how to use you. He knows exactly who you are and what you're capable of." They began their movement toward the extraction point, carefully navigating the treacherous mountain terrain while maintaining security protocols. The adrenaline of combat was fading, replaced by the exhaustion that always followed intense engagements. 2 hours later, they reached the designated pickup zone where a special operations helicopter was waiting. As they approached the aircraft, Maya could see Colonel Morrison standing near the ramp, apparently having come personally to oversee the extraction. After they had loaded their equipment and the helicopter was airborne, Morrison approached Maya over the engine noise. "Sergeant Chen, I've been monitoring the radio traffic from this operation. Master Sergeant Rodriguez tells me you made some exceptional shots today." "I did my job, sir." Morrison studied her carefully. "Alpha Team reports that sniper fire from the Overwatch position saved their lives. They said the shooting was some of the most accurate they've ever seen under combat conditions." Maya remained silent, unsure how to respond. "Sergeant Williams also filed an initial report that mentions shots at ranges exceeding 1,600 meters in difficult weather conditions. He describes your performance as exceptional." Williams, seated nearby, nodded in confirmation. "Sir, Sergeant Chen's capabilities exceed anything in her official records. She's one of the finest snipers I've ever worked with." Morrison was quiet for several minutes, apparently processing this information. Finally, he leaned closer to Maya so his voice wouldn't carry over the helicopter's noise. "Sergeant Chen, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your capabilities based on incomplete information and personal prejudices. Your performance today demonstrates that I was wrong." Maya looked at him with surprise. Military officers of Morrison's rank rarely admitted mistakes, especially to subordinate personnel. "Sir, you had legitimate reasons for your concerns. I understand the pressures you face in ensuring mission success. Perhaps, but I let those pressures cloud my judgment about your abilities." Morrison paused. "I've been in touch with higher headquarters about your background. It seems there are aspects of your previous assignments that weren't fully reflected in your standard personnel file." Maya tensed slightly. Her previous work with classified special operations units was supposed to remain compartmentalized. "Don't worry," Morrison continued. "Your operational security isn't compromised, but I now understand why you were assigned to my unit and what capabilities you bring to our mission." The helicopter began its descent toward the base, and Morrison prepared to return to his seat. Before leaving, he turned back to Maya one final time. Sergeant Chen, report to my office tomorrow morning at 800. I have a new assignment for you, one that will make better use of your particular talents." After Morrison left, Williams leaned over to Maya with a slight smile. "Congratulations. You just went from probation to preferred status in one mission. That doesn't happen often with Colonel Morrison." Maya looked out the helicopter window at the rugged mountain landscape passing below. The Korengal Valley operation had been a turning point, not just in terms of proving her capabilities, but in establishing her place within the unit. She had demonstrated that gender was irrelevant when it came to performing under extreme pressure. "Williams, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you decide to trust me? Even before today's mission, you were willing to work with me professionally despite having no prior experience with female snipers." Williams considered the question carefully. "In this business, you learn to judge people by their actions, not their appearance or background. From the moment I met you, I could tell you were serious about the job. You asked the right questions, prepared thoroughly, and didn't make excuses when things got difficult." He paused. "Plus, I've been doing this long enough to recognize genuine competence when I see it." The helicopter touched down at the base as the sun was setting behind the mountains. As they unloaded their equipment, Maya noticed that word of their mission had already spread. Soldiers who had previously regarded her with skepticism now watched with obvious respect and curiosity. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached as Maya was securing her rifle case. "Sergeant Chen, I heard about your shooting today. William says you made some incredible shots under combat conditions." "I did what was necessary, Master Sergeant." Rodriguez smiled. "That's what the best ones always say. Listen, we've got some other experienced snipers arriving next week. Would you be interested in helping with their mountain warfare orientation? We could use someone with your capabilities to share lessons learned." Maya realized that Rodriguez's request represented complete acceptance by the sniper community at the base. Teaching other snipers was a responsibility reserved for those with proven expertise and unquestioned credibility. "I'd be honored to help, Master Sergeant." That evening, Maya sat in her quarters cleaning and inspecting her rifle, a ritual she had performed hundreds of times throughout her career. As she worked, she reflected on the day's events and their significance. The confrontation with Colonel Morrison had been inevitable. Throughout her military career, she had faced similar skepticism from commanders who doubted whether a woman could perform at the level required for elite combat positions. Each time, she had proven herself through performance rather than argument. What made today different was the context. The Korengal Valley operation had tested not just her marksmanship skills, but her ability to perform under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The shots she had taken, particularly the 2,600-meter engagement of the mortar crew, had pushed her capabilities to their absolute limits. Maya opened her shooting log and made detailed entries for each engagement from the day's mission. She recorded ranges, weather conditions, target descriptions, and ammunition expenditure with the same meticulous care she had maintained throughout her career. The notebook now contained records of 135 confirmed kills, each one representing a situation where her skills had made the difference between mission success and failure. As she wrote, Maya thought about the soldiers whose lives had been saved by her actions today. Alpha Team had returned safely because she had been able to provide effective sniper support under impossible conditions. That knowledge made all the skepticism and prejudice she had endured worthwhile. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Colonel Morrison standing outside, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Sir? May I come in, Sergeant Chen? I'd like to speak with you privately." Maya stepped aside to let him enter, curious about what could have brought him to her quarters for an unofficial visit. Morrison looked around the small room, noting the neatly arranged equipment and the rifle cleaning kit spread on her desk. His eyes paused on the shooting log that lay open beside her weapon. "Is that your personal shooting record?" Maya hesitated, then decided on honesty. Yes, sir. May I? Morrison gestured toward the notebook. Maya nodded, and Morrison carefully examined several pages of entries. His expression grew increasingly serious as he read the detailed combat records. This documents 135 confirmed kills, Morrison said quietly. Your official personnel file shows 17 confirmed kills from your previous deployments. Sir, as I mentioned to Sergeant Williams, operational security requirements sometimes prevent complete reporting of combat activities. Morrison continued studying the notebook. These entries describe operations in locations and time frames that suggest involvement with classified special operations missions. Maya remained silent, unsure how much she should reveal about her previous assignments. Morrison closed the notebook and handed it back to her. Sergeant Chen, I'm not asking for classified information, but I want you to understand that I now realize exactly who you are and what you represent. Sir? You're not just an experienced sniper who happens to be female. You're one of the most accomplished marksmen in the military, regardless of gender. The fact that you're a woman actually makes your achievements more remarkable, given the additional challenges you've had to overcome. Morrison walked to the window and looked out at the mountain landscape. I've spent my entire career in the infantry and special operations communities. I've worked with hundreds of snipers, including some who are legendary within the profession. Based on what I witnessed today and what I see in your records, you rank among the very best. Maya was surprised by the colonel's candor and obvious respect. Sir, I appreciate your confidence, but... Morrison held up his hand. Let me finish. Tomorrow morning I'm going to give you an assignment that reflects your actual capabilities. We've received intelligence about a high-value target operating in this area, someone who's been responsible for numerous attacks on coalition forces. This individual has evaded multiple attempts at capture or elimination. He turned back to face Maya directly. The mission will require extreme precision at long range, possibly under adverse conditions. It's the kind of assignment we would normally reserve for our most experienced snipers. I'm offering it to you because I now understand that's exactly what you are. Maya felt a surge of professional pride mixed with anticipation. This was the kind of challenging assignment she had trained for throughout her career. I'm ready for whatever mission you have, sir. Morrison nodded approvingly. I thought you might be. Report to the briefing room at 0800 tomorrow for detailed planning. And Sergeant Chen? Yes, sir. Thank you for your patience with an old colonel who sometimes lets his prejudices interfere with his judgment. It won't happen again. After Morrison left, Maya returned to her equipment maintenance, but her mind was already focused on the challenges ahead. The Korengal Valley operation had been a test that established her credibility within the unit. Tomorrow's mission would be an opportunity to demonstrate the full extent of her capabilities. As she finished cleaning her rifle, Maya noticed the small marks she had carved into the wooden stock. Each mark represented a confirmed kill, a life taken in service of her country and the protection of her fellow soldiers. There were 135 marks now, arranged in neat rows that told the story of her combat experience. She traced the marks with her finger, remembering the faces and circumstances behind each one. Some had been easy shots at close range in urban environments. Others had been extremely challenging engagements under adverse conditions. All had been necessary to complete her mission and protect innocent lives. Tomorrow, there might be another mark to add to the collection. Maya hoped that when Colonel Morrison discovered those 127 marks on her rifle, he would finally understand that she hadn't asked for special treatment or lower standards. She had simply asked for the opportunity to prove that excellence in combat had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with skill, dedication, and the willingness to do whatever the mission required. As she prepared for sleep, Maya reflected on how far she had come from that first day on the base, when Colonel Morrison had dismissed her capabilities based on assumptions and prejudice. The road to acceptance had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had led to this moment of genuine respect and professional recognition. In the morning, she would face a new challenge and another opportunity to demonstrate that a sniper's worth was measured not by their appearance, but by their ability to deliver precise, effective fire when their country and their comrades needed it most. The 127 marks on her rifle stood as testament to her dedication to that principle, and tomorrow might add one more mark to the collection.